Ever wonder if, like, there's another way of seeing things, another level of reality, just right there? Well, today we're going to dive deep into psychedelics, see how they might change how we see, well, everything.
Yeah, it's wild, right? These substances, they've been pushed aside, misunderstood, but now we're finally looking at them, like, seriously, scientifically.
It's like we can finally have an open conversation,
Yeah,
about something that's been taboo for, like, forever.
totally.
So we're using Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, as our guide. It's his own, like, personal exploration of all this. And what's crazy is he didn't do this when he was young. This guy was almost 60, a well-respected author, and he still jumped into psychedelics head first.
Yeah, and he came from a very materialist view, thought you could explain spiritual stuff with brain chemistry, but he was drawn to those non-material experiences people talk about, the ones you get from psychedelics.
It's a paradox, right? Can you have a materialist explanation for something that feels totally, like, beyond material? How do you even begin to explain that?
That's the big question. And it's been there from the beginning of psychedelic research. We got to go back to the pioneers, people like Humphrey Osmond, he was a psychiatrist, and Aldous Huxley, the Brave New World guy.
Wait, Huxley, the one who was writing about altered states way back when.
The one and only. He actually gave us the word psychedelic. Pretty cool, huh?
That is cool. So what were they even trying to do with these substances in the first place?
At first, it was all about therapy. They thought, hey, maybe these can help with mental health. But then they started looking into creativity, spirituality, and that's where things got really interesting. It challenged everything science thought it knew.
I bet. Trying to study a mystical experience like it's a lab rat. That must have been tough.
Oh, it was, and still is. It's hard to put those experiences into, scientific boxes, and that's where all the debate comes from, subjective versus objective.
Makes you think, though.
Yeah.
You've got these scientists trying to understand it all, and then the CIA gets involved, right? Always a little spooky when they show up. What were they after?
Right. So the CIA, during the Cold War, they got seriously into this stuff, but they weren't so interested in therapy. They wanted to know if psychedelics could be used for interrogation, mind control, even as weapons.
Dark stuff.
Huh.
Do they get anywhere with that?
Nothing we know for sure, at least not publicly. But it shows how powerful these substances seemed, how they were seen as a way to unlock the mind, good or bad.
Yeah, talk about ethical dilemmas. So we've got potential for therapy, crazy experiences, and the CIA lurking in the background. Then research basically stops, right? So who brings it back?
That's where Roland Griffiths comes in, a scientist at Johns Hopkins. His story's interesting because it's personal. Years before he studied this, he had this profound experience, a mystical one, through meditation.
So he wasn't just a scientist. He'd actually been there, in a way. Must have given him a different perspective.
Totally. And his research, it was groundbreaking. He focused on psilocybin, the stuff in magic mushrooms, specifically the spiritual effects.
So we're not talking about some dude tripping in his basement, right? This is legit research using psychedelics to explore consciousness.
Exactly. It's about the brain, how these things change perception, our sense of self, and this is what brings psychedelics back into the light. Even Silicon Valley was paying attention.
Oh, right. Steve Jobs, he credited LSD for helping his creativity. Said it was one of the most important things he ever did.
Crazy, right? A substance that's been demonized might actually be tied to innovation.
Makes you wonder what's really going on in there.
Ah.
But before we get into the brain stuff, let's go back to Michael Pollan. He wasn't just observing all this, right? He jumped right in.
Oh, yeah. He dove right in. He actually tries a bunch of psychedelics, writes about all of them, magic mushrooms, LSD, even that intense toad venom, 5-MeO-DMT. Each one's like a different journey, different insights, emotions, the whole works.
It's like he wants to cover it all, Every single angle of what these experiences are like. So where do you start?
His first time was with magic mushrooms. And he talks about something he calls italicized reality. It's like everything around him is suddenly more vivid, more meaningful.
Italicized reality.
Yeah.
Love that. It's that whole thing people describe. Everything's just more intense, right?
Right. But it gets even more intense with LSD. That's when things get really wild for him.
Oh, yeah.
He has a guide for that one someone experienced, and he goes deep into this feeling of love, connection. He even says love is everything. Like this raw, emotional epiphany, the adult cynicism, it just melts away.
That's kind of beautiful, in a way. Like psychedelics can strip away all that baggage we build up, let us see the world like we did as kids again. But Pollan, he's honest about the tough parts too, right? He talks about ego dissolution, and that honestly sounds kind of scary.
It can be. On psilocybin, he goes through this self-dissolving, the lines between him and everything else, they just blur. He even says it was like experiencing abstract art, this lack of form, terrifying, but also freeing.
So it's not all sunshine and roses then. It can get really intense, kind of messed up even. And then there's the toad venom. Even Pollan was nervous about that. And he was up for pretty much anything.
He was right to be nervous. That stuff, 5-MeO DMT, it's known for being crazy strong, and it doesn't last long either. Pollan, he describes it like this breakthrough, terrifying, but he comes face to face with ultimate reality. It's like what those mystics talk about, mysterium tremendum, this encounter with the divine that's awesome and terrifying at the same time.
Whoa, okay, that's intense. It's like he was pushing his limits, right? Risking some serious psychological stuff. It's a good story and all, but these are just his experiences, right? What about the science? What's actually happening in our brains when we take this stuff?
That's where Robin Carhart Harris comes in. He's a neuroscientist doing groundbreaking work on this thing called the default mode network, the DMN.
Okay, now you're going to have to explain that one. Default mode network. What even is that?
Think of it like this. It's the network in your brain that's active when you're not really doing anything. Daydreaming, thinking about the past, stressing about the future, just lost in thought. That's the DMN. And it's really connected to our sense of self, our ego.
So like when I'm replaying that awkward conversation in my head or freaking out about deadlines, that's the DMN.
Bingo. And Carhart Harris, he finds that psychedelics, they can actually quiet down the DMN. And when that happens, he thinks that's where those feelings come from. The ego dissolving, the interconnectedness, new perspectives, all that. It's like the brain breaks free from its usual patterns, starts making new connections instead.
So instead of being stuck in our own heads, we experience something bigger, something beyond us. It's like hitting reset on your brain, right?
Exactly. And that's where the therapeutic stuff comes in. See, by messing with those negative thought patterns, loosening the ego's grip, psychedelics, they might be able to help with all sorts of stuff. Addiction, depression, anxiety.
So this isn't just about getting high and forgetting your problems for a while.
Nope. There's a real chance these things could actually help people long term. And this is where Pollan's experience with that psilocybin trial, the one with the cancer patients at NYU, gets really interesting. He wanted to see this stuff in action.
Makes sense. It's the one thing to read about it, but to actually see it, hear those stories, that's got to be powerful.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did these people find peace, even though they were facing death?
It's an amazing story, really. There's this one guy, Patrick Metz, he's a news director at terminal cancer, and he's in the trial. And his wife, Lisa, she is not on board at first. She's totally against it, thinks it's like giving up.
Oh, wow. I bet that was tough for both of them.
Yeah.
So what changed her mind?
Seeing the difference in Patrick, that's what did it. The psilocybin, it just shifted something in him. His whole outlook changed. And it wasn't just him. She saw it too, the impact it had.
It's not just the patient. It's the people around them too. It's like this ripple effect, huh? What about Patrick, though? What was his experience like during the psilocybin session?
It's pretty profound. He feels this incredible love, this feeling of being connected to everything. And he realizes that death, it's not the end. It's a transition. And that just changes everything for him. He stops being so afraid of dying and starts really living, making the most of the time he has left.
That's really powerful. It shows you just how much potential these substances have, how they can help us cope with some of the toughest stuff life throws at us. Did Pollan talk about any other patients? Were their experiences similar?
Yeah, definitely. There's this one, an astronaut actually, and after his psilocybin session, he just quit smoking cold turkey. Says it felt irrelevant after what he experienced.
Wow, to just quit like that after years of smoking, that's got to tell you something. It's like these experiences can help us see what really matters,
Right.
But these are just a few stories, right? This research, it's just the beginning, isn't it? What's next for psychedelics? Can they really change how we treat mental health? It's like opening up this whole new world of what's possible, for mental health.
It really is. And we're just getting started. It's a whole different way of thinking about it, treating it.
So are we like on the verge of some psychedelic revolution? Is psilocybin going to be the new Prozac?
Well, hold your horses. It's early days still, but the research, it's looking really good. Even the FDA, and they're usually so careful, right? They're saying, hey, keep researching this psilocybin stuff, especially for depression.
That's got to mean something, right? The FDA is on board. It's like they're saying, yeah, maybe these substances, if we use them the right way, they could actually help people who are struggling.
It's a new approach, for sure. The way we do things now, medications, therapy, it's got its limits. Psychedelics, they're different. They can be transformative and fast. It's like they help you unlock those insights that might take years to get to in therapy.
A fast track for personal growth, huh?
Yeah.
But we can't just ignore the risks, right? We can't just start handing out shrooms like candy.
Exactly. We got to be smart about it. These are powerful substances, Got to be used in a safe environment with the right preparation and guidance, but the benefits, we can't ignore those either.
A balancing act, for sure. So how do we do it? How do we make sure people are safe while still exploring this potential?
The million-dollar question. And researchers are on it, figuring out the best ways to do this, the right protocols, the guidelines for using psychedelics in therapy. It's all about making sure people are screened properly and supported throughout the experience.
That makes sense. So much potential for healing, but you got to treat it with respect, be cautious. What do you think if people take one thing away from all of this? What should it be?
I'd say this. If we use them responsibly, psychedelics could help us understand our own minds in a whole new way. It's like our mental states, they're not set in stone. We can explore them, shift them, and sometimes a little shakeup can lead to some pretty amazing breakthroughs.
Letting go of your mind to find yourself, huh? That's something to think about. Thanks for diving into all this with me.